So welcome everyone to the Open Access Monographs Solve-a-palooza. If you weren't planning on being in this session, you're in the wrong place, but we're very happy to have you here. We are going to cover quite a bit today. The first thing, if you could go over to the Pathable site and just fill out our poll of who you are on the Pathable site where you logged in. There's a poll that asks what's your background, so we can find out who it is we're talking to. And while you're doing that, I'll give a little bit of a sense of what the goal of the session is today. We are going to go over some brief project presentations. And before I do that, I'll say I'm Kate McCready. I am at the University of Minnesota Libraries, and I am serving as the facilitator of this session. And one of the co-authors on one of the projects that will be presented. But we're going to first cover some brief project presentations, and we've ordered them in the publication process. And all of these are looking at how scholarly monographs are faring in this open access world, and how we are moving that forward, publishing scholarly monographs as open access. There will be 6 projects that will be presented, and we'll give you updates about each of those projects. And then we're going to break into breakout sessions and talk about solutions to the problems that have been arising in moving scholarly monograph publishing toward open access, and how we can work collaboratively together to come up with solutions. In each room, you will be automatically assigned to a breakout room. In each room, there'll be a facilitator and a note taker, and then we'll come back together and we'll present
Thank you again. Appreciate it.
about those
Okay.
notes
Take care.
that are coming out. And just a reminder to everybody that I can't mute you, so because this is a meeting and not a webinar setting. And so if you can mute yourself upon arrival, that'd be wonderful. Now, in the poll, I'm seeing the results are that 64% of us are librarians. I am a librarian. 8% are publishers. There are 11% are vendors, and then 3% are consultants, with 14% as others. And we don't have any students with us, according to this poll results. So I'm going to now just want to mention 2 things. On the Pathable site, it also has biographies of each of the presenters, but we had too many presenters to list them all on the Pathable site. So we have 2 people who I wanted to mention specifically, and that is Kathy Holland and Mike Taylor, both from digital science. And Kathy, or I'll start with Mike. He is the head of metrics development. And after researching altmetrics and open access books, and after 20 years of working at Elsevier on books, and journals and R&D, he joined the digital science, where he's head of data insights for dimensions and altmetric. And Kathy is the director of global publisher business development at Digital Science, and she has over 15 years in the publishing industry. And her focus is on journals and technology spaces. So with that, I'll let you read about the other bios on the Pathable site, and I will turn it over to Peter Potter to talk about Tome and give you an update about that.
Great, thanks, Kate. Yes, my name is Peter Potter. I am the visiting program officer for ARL, responsible for Tome, which is toward an open monograph ecosystem. It is a 5-year pilot project of the Association of American Universities, Association of Research Libraries, and Association of University Presses. We are in year 3. We're just finishing up year 3 of the 5-year pilot. So we're finally beginning to get some interesting data on the books published. And I've attached here in the document section, or whatever that is called, the a longer version of this presentation, which I gave at the Tome annual meeting during Open Access Week, and you're welcome to take a look at that and you'll get more information. But very briefly, we have awarded over $1 million in grants over the first 3 years. 68 books have been published with 27 more under contract. We have been pretty representative of the fields, the humanities and social science fields, where monograph publishing is difficult for publishers to break even. And so that has been, I think, a success so far, the fact that we have been able to represent so many different fields. We have at the moment 18 participating universities and 66 participating presses. 21 of those thus far have published tome books. So again, the participating universities and the presses, you can find that information either on the openmonographs.org site or in the presentation that I gave last week that you can access. Emma, can you turn to the next slide? So just very briefly, I wanted to highlight some of what we are learning. And again, the details are much more clear in the larger presentation, but we are learning, perhaps no surprise to many people, but OA does drive engagement, that the number of downloads, the number of views, significantly higher than, say, the sales of the books, of the print books, and that the more platforms, the better. That means if we can have, when a book is made open access, if it can be open access on multiple sites like JSTOR, Project Muse, OAPN, in repositories and institutional repositories, the more the better. And in the cases of the books that are on these multiple sites, it does seem like the number of, the amount of engagement is higher. The global usage has been very impressive, and this is perhaps one of the biggest, I think, pluses of open access, that a lot of these fields are international in scope, and a print book just does not reach many of the audiences. So we had last week an author present whose book was about dance in China, and a person from, or a scholar, actually, it was a group of scholars from, I think it was Bulgaria, found the book, and they were interested in it because they were working on dance. And so it's finding audiences. These open access books are finding audiences that you wouldn't necessarily expect. So far, no discernible impact on sales. And what we know we need in the future is better and more nuanced metrics and best practices to promote works. Promotion does really help, and that's where we've been working with digital science with Kathy and Mike on this area of social media. Any kind of engagement that we can drive seems to work. And I have here this quote from Mike Taylor: both OA books and chapters have significantly higher use on social networks, higher coverage in the mass media and blogs, and evidence of higher rates of social impact in policy documents. So that's my presentation, and I can turn it over now to Emma Moles.
Hi, great. Good morning, everyone, or good morning for those of you where it is morning. My name is Emma Moles. I'm the Publishing Services Librarian at the University of Minnesota, and myself, along with colleague Kate McCready, Interim Associate University Librarian for Content and Collections. We've been thinking a lot about, with an increase in open access monographs, how are those being collected by libraries, and how are libraries acquiring those? What Kate and I know from working within our own library and talking to our colleagues is that a lot of library acquisition models are still very much based off of ebook purchase and print purchase. So one of the opportunities that we saw as the Tome project has really been taking off is the of what a great corpus it is to survey to find out some more about distribution of those open access monographs. So Kate and I last December, January, sometime when there was snow on the ground, we surveyed the participating presses in the tome program to ask some questions about distribution. Our findings, I would say, are sort of what we expected, especially knowing some about the titles of our own tome-funded books from the University of Minnesota, is that the books are available in a variety of formats. So tome books, of course, are available as open access monographs, but they're also frequently sold as print copies. They may be sold as ebook copies. And what all of this really means is that it causes some challenges for libraries on the acquisition side. Collection management, especially of print books, is done mostly by university libraries through Gobi, formerly Yankee Book Peddler, which often means that libraries might be seeing the print copy of the book before any of their systems are aware that the open access monograph is available. So Kate and I, we did this survey. We found some interesting things about some opportunities for libraries and for presses to really partner to make sure that those open access monograph copies are readily available in library discovery systems and in a way that matches how we treat books currently, which again, often is built around systems in which libraries are actively purchasing books rather than acquiring open copies. Our paper based on this survey is coming out soon. We're happy to talk more about it. And we're excited about the opportunity of libraries really investing more systems and labor and time into collecting open access monographs. So thank you. And next up, we have Charles.
Oh, hello there. I'm Charles Watkinson. I'm AUL for Publishing at University of Michigan, and my colleague Emma Di Pasquale worked with me on this. Next slide, please. And just to say, Emma's poster that some of you may have seen is also posted on the files part of the Pathable site for this session, a video of her describing that poster. But what we're talking about is a large experiment in free books online. So University of Michigan Press have made available around 250 open access books over the last few years. But this summer, we were able to make available all 1,500 titles that the University of Michigan Press has on its ebook collection, which is self-hosted on our open source site Fulcrum. And this is what we learned from that experience. And I will say that what's been interesting is many other university presses have done similar types of exercise this year and have learned some very interesting similar things. A massive experiment in what happens when you make books free. So the Google map that we show here, this is an impact map that we have up on the publicly on the fulcrum.org Michigan site. And over the summer, we saw a spread of global usage that we hadn't seen before. And 85% of individual usage over the summer came from outside the USA, with some really interesting hotspots. Turkey and India have been areas that we've heard a lot about from other vendors like JSTOR when they talk about their open exercises. What's also stunning is how little usage there was from African countries, except South Africa. There is a very strong gap still in open access use in Africa that we were seeing. The use of the term Fertile Crescent refers back to the Neolithic and the sort of the spread of agriculture from this area, so Turkey and India in the Middle East. Secondly, we saw that cataloging really does matter. The institutions who had the highest use were those who had already procured the University of Michigan Press ebook collection. So open access records and free book records going into the catalog makes a great deal of difference. But of course, users of open access and free books don't need to log in through the library proxy server. So they do tend to be undercounted. Open access books, if you look at the geographical range of a college town, you see a lot of use. If you look just at the library system, you don't see as much use. And finally, that monographs are read, which is one of those things that we're relieved to see. When monographs weren't properly electronic, there was the suspicion that they weren't read because they were shut up in print collections. But when they're made electronic, they get a great deal of use, and from some very unexpected places. The educated lay reader that was previously a sort of a lazy term that editors used is a real thing. And we're seeing particular interest from retirees, as I will show in the next slide. And just finally to say that the precarity of scholars is not going to get any better. So institutional affiliation can no longer be relied upon for access to ebooks. So next slide, please. So one of the things that we did in August was to create a little pop-up survey. It's very unobtrusive and it can easily be made to go away, but it pops up whenever you read an open access book on our site Fulcrum. And we've had a surprising number of people provide information about how they found the book, how they are using the book, and any other things they want to share about themselves. And we've had over 700 responses, and they really do fill out this picture of the needs, the unmet needs of scholars, especially during this time, but more generally. And by scholars, I'm referring very broadly to people who are interested readers. And you can see here examples that really tell this story. I live in a remote part of India. I'm happy with books that don't take much time to download. I have a need to use a screen reader, so I just need these ebooks in addition to print. I like to read in print, but I also have different needs when I do e-reading. And then this educated lay reader. When I was working full-time, there's no time to read anything, but now I can. And lastly, ebooks just make the scholarly caste system worse in this country. So this is a really important equity, justice, and inclusion move. You can learn more about what we learned at that link at the bottom, and I hope you'll learn more about University of Michigan Press ebook collection as well. And now I'm going to pass over to Wendy Queen from Project Muse.
Thank you, Charles. I'm Wendy Queen, and I am the director of Project Muse. So hopefully I can fit a very interesting story into a 2-minute session today. So COVID-19 presented many challenges for researchers to access the materials they needed to continue their work. The challenges included the lack of access to physical materials, as well as a breakdown of remote authentication and infrastructure. So in March, Muse was watching users get turned away from gated content at an alarming rate. In response, Muse quickly reached out to our publishers and asked if they would be willing to make gated content freely available to all. The request was met with enthusiasm, so Muse pivoted and freed content from almost 80 publishers, resulting in 35% of books and over 40% of our journals. The program ran from mid-March to the end of June for most publishers. As this slide demonstrates, in summary, we saw open books garnering the most usage, but also increased usage on content that remained gated behind access control. The increase of usage of gated content could have been caused by the lack of access to physical items in the library, but we also want to know if more open content drives more unanticipated usage because the researcher has many more entry points, thus less authentication barriers, resulting in a more fluid user experience. Focusing specifically on open access, again, books usage increased at an incredible rate, the peak being in June at almost 8,000%, from about 4,600 downloads in 2019 to almost 400,000 in 2020. As a side, we're not sure why the OA journal content, while seeing increases, didn't see the same level of increase as books. We provided each participating publisher with detailed analytics, and each publisher will make their own conclusions. But what we hope is with this data, we can encourage publishers to create and embrace new OA models. Also to demonstrate the value of being on a platform like Muse, where there is a focus on discoverability and user experience. What isn't represented on this slide is during this period, Muse was used in almost every country, and that is important to Muse's mission to increase access to content worldwide, to create more structural equity. I think we did have a lot of usage in Africa, so it's counter to what Charles was saying in his experiment, but I think what that shows is the need for all of us to aggregate our data together to learn why that is. And my favorite anecdote is we saw a lot of usage coming out of Asian countries, specifically in China, and the #1 most downloaded title from the Central European University Press was Academic Freedom, the Global Challenge. So if that doesn't wrap up the importance of doing this, I don't know what does. So what's next for Muse in this data? Like I said, we need to share with others so we can put this data together through initiatives like the Data Trust. And we will continue to analyze the data and use it to inform our future programs to support OA. And we hope to find more ways to share and promote the data, resulting in more Born OA content in the humanities. So thank you. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ross.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rose Pine. I'm Director of Open Access Books at Springer Nature. Being able to point to evidence of increased and more diverse readership can be immensely powerful in making the case for open access to book authors. With this in mind, Springer Nature and the Cord Research Group at Curtin University collaborated to find out how OA affects the geographic usage of scholarly books. So our analysis is based on a data set of almost 4,000 Springer Nature books that included 281 open access books. And we've released a joint white paper and a preprint presenting our findings. So here's what we found out. OA has a robust effect on the number of downloads, on the geographic diversity of downloads, and on the citations of books. Downloads of OA books in the study were on average 10 times higher than those of the non-OA books, and citations of OA books were 2.4 times higher on average. For every category of books in the sample, there was a usage advantage. So we could see the effect on usage for all disciplinary groupings in both humanities and social sciences and STM, across all 3 years of publication in the study, for all types of books, for monographs and edited collections and mid-length books, and for every month after publication. OA books in the study also had a greater proportion of usage in a wider range of countries. They were downloaded in 61% more countries than non-OA books, and you can see the chart here, and I will emphasize that's on a log scale. OA books had higher usage in low-income and lower middle-income countries, and we did see usage in a high number of countries in Africa. Analysis using the Gini coefficient disparity index showed that OA books have quantitatively greater geographic diversity of downloads. Downloads of OA books from the open web were also generally around double those from institutional network points. Books that contained the names of countries and regions in their title generally showed enhanced usage in those regions, with the effect most apparent for Latin America and Africa. And the effect was much stronger for OA books. That is, not only is OA enhancing usage in countries underrepresented in global scholarship, it's also enhancing the global usage of scholarship about those countries. So open access is, in other words, making a substantial difference to the reach of books and their authors. I would encourage you to check out our white paper and to the question that's just come up. In ours, we just used English language books. I'm now going to pass over to Rebecca Welsenbach for the next slide.
Hello. Can everyone hear me okay? I had to switch to headphones. Okay. I'm Rebecca Welsenbach. I'm the Research Impact Librarian at the University of Michigan Library, and I'm here representing a large group of PIs, including Kevin Hawkins at University of North Texas, Brian O'Leary from the Book Industry Study Group, Catherine Skinner from Educopia, Lucy Montgomery and Cameron Nyland from Curtin University, as well as our program officer, Christina Drummond. And I'll give just a really brief overview of our ongoing project, which is to pilot a data trust for open access ebook usage. As Kate said, we put these projects, yeah? Was someone speaking to me?
It was just an echo actually from you, Rebecca.
Oh, weird. Okay. So our current grant, which is funded by the Mellon Foundation, focuses on implementing recommendations that came out of a stakeholder planning workshop that we held in December of 2018. That workshop brought together a variety of stakeholders, and the aim was to discuss the opportunities and challenges of understanding usage data for open access books, and especially in bringing it together in meaningful ways. And we wanted to talk about the potential of sharing the burden of doing this work and amplifying the benefit with a mechanism called a data trust. So why books, why open access books, and why a data trust? As many of us have found, compared to journals, tracking books is quite tricky. Mechanisms that work pretty well for journals, like DOIs, can't at this point be simply ported over to books because they're applied inconsistently or perhaps not at all. That's just one example of the kind of complication we find. There are many others that we could go into with more time. So books are complicated in their own special ways. There's also a lot of variety among those who are creating them and publishing them. Second, our project is particularly interested in open access books for many of the reasons that you have heard Roz and Charles and others describe, because they offer a new set of challenges in the stories that we want to tell. We need new ways to talk about usage and impact when sales do not provide an adequate reflection. And we need new ways to justify funding from programs such as Tome, as Peter was talking about. It's increasingly important for books to appear on many different platforms. I think everyone spoke to that, and yet that also makes it harder to track usage, both in terms of aggregating it, but also normalizing data that is captured in different ways in different places. So this has been challenging for all of the stakeholders we've been talking to, and it doesn't make a lot of sense for them to work in isolation to try to solve these challenges. So the crux of our project, why a data trust? Data trusts have emerged as a way for public and private partnerships to govern data access and aggregation in order to facilitate data reporting across controlled data sets. In the case of our project, because many different stakeholders have key needs in common, because it's difficult for many of the stakeholders to address these needs in isolation, because we need to develop some shared norms in this space about how we track and measure and analyze usage in books and talk about it. And most important of all, because this usage data itself is more meaningful and more important, tells more meaningful stories when it's aggregated with comparable data from other sources. So we're currently working on several areas of the project in parallel. The team at Curtin University is developing the technical infrastructure for the data trust, including both methods for bringing data in, as well as visualization dashboards. We're working through a number of complex legal issues pertaining to gathering and sharing data and how that will all work with different laws in different countries and many different partners involved. And we're advancing conversations with our colleagues and stakeholders in all areas in order to better understand their needs and priorities and develop really clear, robust use cases for this kind of a project, a community governed effort. So to paraphrase our co-PIs, Cameron and Lucy, our hope is that by working together, data trust participants can gain access to comparative analytics and economies of scale while also addressing resource challenges within organizations where there may be less technical capacity. And I'll stop there so that we can move forward with our discussion.
Wonderful. Thank you all. All right, we are now going to move into breakout rooms. And I have assigned you all to rooms. In each room, there is going to be a facilitator and a note taker. And we're going to be in those rooms for about 20 minutes. And then we'll come back to do some reporting out. The questions that we're going to ask you is what struck you or surprised you during the presentations? And then what is the most pressing problem and what solutions could be pursued? What seems like the most attractive solution and what would it take to pursue that solution? And if you have any questions or comments that you want to use chat for, please use the chat in the Zoom, not in the Pathable. Use the Zoom chat so we're just all in one place. So I'm going to open all the rooms now. You'll have to click to join that room. And one little side note to Mike Taylor, if you're not in the right room, I'm going to try and move you now that you got in. So,
Thank you very much.
Yes, I'll try and watch for you. So everybody go ahead and click on accept once you get into your rooms.
Kate,
Yes.
is everyone out in breakouts?
I got a few people trailing,
I
but
see
they
him
just
there.
may not want to go.
We got Mike in.
Mike got in and I got him in the right room. I can't
Oh,
even.
good. I have no idea how.
I don't know either.
There's so many. This is Ann, by the way. There's so many emails back and forth. My box is literally full.
I bet it is. Thank you for your quick work. I can't.
I'm glad I was here because it took us all of us to get it together.
I know I was trying to manage getting everybody into their breakout rooms and getting the right facilitator and note taker in each room.
Right.
While I was doing that, my
Jeez.
face must have looked like I'm like, I should turn off the camera because I think I must be like scrunching my face with lots of worry.
You know, he has 2 email addresses.
What's that?
He has 2 email addresses.
Yeah.
And he wasn't registered through Pathable.
Yeah.
Sorry. It's just too funny.
Well, I think everybody's in except there's 2 people, but they just
I came back to see how the breakouts worked.
It seems like it worked great.
Cool.
I'm seeing in our shared notes document, I'm seeing some note taking. So that seems to be working. And I think everybody's in their right room.
Cool. Good job.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I did at the very last second, I recreated the rooms to see if I could get Mike into one of them, but because I didn't know how that would work.
Yeah. Sorry I wasn't here. I was at the doctor this morning and just walked in the door at 12:15 and started checking rooms.
No,
and then all your messages came through. So
you were great. You were great.
all right.
It all worked.
Good.
Which is wonderful.
All right. Well, I'll be in Slack now. So if you need anything, let me know.
Okay. Thank you so much.
And if Mike needs help or instructions, I don't know if he's ever been in this before.
Yeah, I'm assuming he's done.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Just let me know if he needs anything. Thanks, Kate.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, we're in breakout rooms. I just put you in room 2. Hi, we're in breakout rooms. I'm going to assign you to a room. Hi.
I'm going to be studying and taking a test.
Okay, I'll leave you alone. Hello, we are in breakout rooms. I'm going to assign you to a room.
Thank you.
It'll work. There we go.
Thank
There
you.
you go. Yep. Hi there. We are in breakout rooms, but they're closing up soon. But I'm going to move you into a room, and then I'll bring you back with everybody. Being up. Okay. You left. Hi, we are in breakout rooms. I'm going to assign you to one. Hello, everyone. As everybody's coming back, we'll just take a minute to regroup. Looks like some groups are wrapping up, but they'll get kicked out in about 30 seconds and come back to 23 seconds. It says they'll be coming back to us. So it'll just take a second before we get everybody back. Right. Just a few more seconds for everybody to come back in. Looks like we are almost all back here. All right, well, welcome back to the main room. At this point, we're going to have the note takers from each of the rooms report back on some of the themes and just have talk for a minute or two from each group. If we can start with group 1, I believe that was Rebecca.
Yes, hi. Emma facilitated our conversation and I took our notes. So the theme that I saw really running through our conversation was just this experience of fractured systems that people are struggling to navigate, really on all sides, whether it is libraries trying to get information into their catalogs about open access books, end users trying to locate the open access version of a book. And, you know, it's just so much easier to find every imaginable print version before you can navigate your way to an OA version, especially if you don't know the OA exists. Maybe if you go looking just for the OA, you'll find it, but if you don't know what's there, it would be very hard to find. And so we talked a bit about the variation in experiences there, and also the difficulty of pinning down responsibility. Who can fix those problems and what power do they have? We heard anecdotes about libraries going back to publishers to try to fix Onyx records. But when those have passed through a different aggregator or a third party, sometimes that control is lost. Likewise, when a book appears on Amazon or in Google search results, we don't always have direct control over how it appears and who can find it when, but it sure seems like we ought to. So how we hold and cede control over information about our books was another sort of running theme and pressing challenge that we found. And then, of course, the ever-present problem of funding. Looking towards solutions, there was some conversation about decisions about offering books directly versus through aggregators and other platforms, and that balance between maintaining that control over your materials versus losing some of that shared collective infrastructure. And we talked a bit about the importance of, you know, talking to one another about sharing experiences, information, and shared staffing and infrastructure, so that we're not all toiling in isolation to try to deal with these very, very thorny problems. I'm sure I've left some things, but I think those were the biggest issues.
That's great, thank you. And Roz was the reporter for group 2.
Sure, so Charles moderated our discussion and I was the reporter. I think 3 main themes emerged from our discussion. So we talked about the effect of publishing in different languages or of not doing so, the geographical spread of usage, and then we talked a lot about federated search and discovery. Was pointed out that a lot of the usage seems to be English language based, even though English is not the main language in many of the countries where the usage is found. And so there was a conversation, is OA driving an anglicized mode of scholarship around the world, which I think is a really important question. We had some discussion about why some of the studies found much higher usage in Africa and why some didn't. We talked about print cultures, but we also then, that led to a discussion about how OA is being adopted in different countries and the diversity of ways in which OA is being driven, but also about then the challenges of discoverability. So books are published in multiple languages, we hope, on multiple systems, and then with discovery also via multiple systems. And so how do we actually ensure that readers all over the world are aware of open access books? You know, even libraries sometimes struggle to figure out if there's an OA ebook version available, so that might be even harder for a regular user. And we talked about the role of librarians in facilitating access to OA books, sometimes outside of catalogs and formal routes. But also that maybe the lack of usage in some countries is related to poor discoverability. We talked about lack of standardized metadata, about poor records in many cataloging systems. Maybe you don't even get an ISBN. It makes it very hard to support discoverability. We also talked about whether the directory of open access books was in fact the federated search that we're looking for and whether that was sufficient. But then there was a question, are all OA books truly logged there? Do enough people know to go there? And we talked about what other solutions there might be for more community sharing of records.
Thank you, Raz. And then Mike Taylor was the scribe and reporter for Group 3.
Yeah, we had a pretty good conversation. I think one of the themes that emerged for us was the new versus the old, and in particular the continuing importance of the library's role in metadata and curating models, the value of platforms such as JSTOR, but also the increasing importance of the emergent routes to obtaining a book. So, for example, we talked about social media, we talked about Google, and really, this for me at least, this starts to suggest that there's a bifurcation. We've got the traditional routes where librarians are curating their collections along all that question. How do they go about curating when we have potentially have so much open access material to hand, versus that public usage, the public accessibility, the search engines, the social media, and so forth. Of course, we inevitably commented, as other people did, on the patchy infrastructure, and really the importance of the community to engage with infrastructure innovations such as Tome, making sure that as we approach the end of the 5-year project of Tome, we're about 3 years in now, that we need to have clear outcomes, and we can only generate those clear outcomes by working with the community. So really the importance of everyone from publishers to librarians to academics to engage with these innovations and to start moving towards a little bit of a consensus. And finally, we talked about the business model of publishers, their role in open access, particularly in marketing, but also how do they go about selecting price points? How do they go about choosing BPCs, setting BPCs? And really one of those things that's been actively discussed over the last year is that lack of consensus for book publishers at the moment. I think that probably sums up Group 3 quite nicely.
Thank you so much. And then for Group 4, we have Kathy Holland.
Say hello. So we had some good discussions as well. We did not quite get through all the questions, but that happens when you don't have a lot of time. But I think quick high-level takeaways here. I mean, everybody thought it was really great to see that we were assessing kind of global usage and global data. We felt that was fairly inclusive. We also had very positive responses to see a number of publishers that responded well when asked to go temporarily open due to kind of the COVID crisis. And we definitely felt there was a sense of kind of we're all in this together, which kind of is what's happening. We had a lot of positive kind of mentions of the idea of like seeing all these programs. I think not everybody was aware of all them. And they definitely tell a bigger story that everybody is kind of looking at experimentation in terms of models and different ways to do things. And alongside that, it's really nice to see kind of validation of doing open access publishing, specifically in the monograph space. There's definitely a need to put a few more standards around those, especially in terms of bots, which might drive up usage when it really shouldn't be driven up. Let me see what else here. Also, we talked a little bit about kind of other metrics that people are looking to see kind of what is successful or maybe not successful in some of these, very cool experiments going on right now. We talked about the interest in seeing data on kind of different languages for some of the books to see if, certain languages do better than others, and also looking again at geographic distribution. And we definitely talked a little bit about kind of having a place to find OA books where they're all together. I think that's kind of a running theme throughout all of these discussions. And then moving down for kind of the problems of open access ebooks, definitely funding is a big one. And I think we've got a couple people that made the point that over the next few years, funding is, being cut due to COVID and due to everything going on. So that's going to become more difficult, not just to find funding, but also the stability of different models. It's very hard to try something out if you don't have kind of a stable funding source. Let's see, and like I said, there's still definitely experimentation going on in terms of problems. So hopefully that will solve a little bit. Let's see, and I think that is as far as we got. We did not get to potential solutions, so we ran out of time. But
Wonderful.
That's us.
All right, thank you, Kathy. And then for the last just a couple of minutes that we have, Charles Watkinson said he would take those reporting out and give us a little bit of a sense of kind of what the themes were between all of the groups. So I'll turn it over to Charles. Thank you.
Well, what a great session. I think the thing that's maybe on a lot of our minds is we know that we are hitting turbulent waters economically within our library budgets. So what can we do beyond funding to support open access books? So I think there are three things that were really coming up for me. I mean, one was that we can advocate as librarians, as publishers, as vendors internally around discovery and the importance of discovery and the importance of systems that enable discovery of open access books. And I think there's a very strong part of this, which is also advocacy that connects to the move towards equity, justice, and inclusion that is such a strong feature within our institutions. So really connecting this work to the university's larger focus on equity, justice, and inclusion. And that means, importantly, thinking about other languages, other parts of the world. And so open access books being published in Armenia, open access books being published in Russia, open access books being published in Latin America. How will we get those into our systems, especially in their local languages? But we can advocate, we can connect. These are complex issues, but advocacy is really important. The second area is clearly discovery. Librarians, I mean, this is what we do, but when I say we, that's a little bit difficult because a group of librarians is really missing from this conversation, and that is our technical services colleagues. It's the people who really think about MARC and metadata and systems, and how do we enlist them in this area, especially when there's sort of this division between scholarly communications and acquisitions and collections development that has been observed in the landscape. There's a big question in systems around the question of centralized or decentralized approaches. And there are some central players like Directory of Open Access Books, but are they inclusive enough? Should we really just be focusing on standards that we already have and really encouraging the use of those standards and encouraging the efforts of people who work with those standards every day? So that was another big theme and a thing that we can do without having to spend money with our existing staffs. And then the final area, which didn't come up a huge amount, but I think is really important, is we've now got a bunch of open access books. We've actually got a lot of open access books out there. So the question is, what's the opportunity that we can now realize in terms of showing how open access books are different? And by this, I mean open access books, open licensed books, not just free to read. So particularly thinking about how we work in instruction contexts. How can one actually use a Creative Commons licensed book in an instructional context in a way that you might not have been able to use a flat type of book? Also, there are little things like many of our libraries have Wikipedia editathons. What would it look like if we focus on actually enriching records with links to open access books that we know? Good quality, peer-reviewed, authoritative open access books. That could drive a lot of usage and really accomplish some of our end goals. And finally, we all have social media accounts. As libraries, as individuals, what happens if we boost those books through our social media activities? So I think lots of opportunity, no one solution, but this was a super session. I wish we had 4 hours for our conversation. Thank you.